We'll open with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item would be the consent agenda. It consists of June 20th council meeting minutes, June 14th Utility Commission minutes, the June 27th Planning Commission minutes, and then we have license and permits. There's an exempt gambling permit for St. Francis Xavier Church and the Legion Unit 206 Auxiliary and the Fire Department. And there's two permits for amplification, and that's the Windom Area Chamber, or both of those are the Windom Area Chamber on July 20th and August 22nd. And then the final item of the consent agenda is the regular bills.
I'd make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we have any department heads? No? Okay, item 3 would be the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities presentation. Marty Seifert.
Great, thank you for having me. Boy, I wish the legislature operated this quickly. Thank you for having me today. I have a slide presentation. There's some extra copies of my presentation on the desk over there. By way of introduction, Marty Seifert. I work with the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, which Windom has been a longtime member. And we yearly come around and just let you know what happened at the legislative session, so you know what you got as a result of the legislature. You move to the next slide. We represent over 100 cities, all rural, on kind of the bread and butter issues. We don't get involved in social issues or that kind of stuff. It's mainly bread and butter city issues that our board of directors, which is made up of mayors, council members, and administrators, tell us to go figure out. So local government aid, environment, economic development, transportation, annexation, land use, and labor and employment are the big issues we work on. We do have other ones that bubble up, like the police duty disability issue. We got roped into that. This paid leave thing, we got roped in a little bit on that because that's going to obviously impact cities as well. So we do get roped in on issues as they pop up at the legislature. Even the marijuana stuff, they're kind of mandating that cities have to sell marijuana. They're not allowing local control, which is something we advocated for. The next slide talks a little bit about the legislative priorities that the board ordered us to get involved with. So the top is always local government aid, which is almost all of our cities get some sort of local government aid, and we advocated for a $150 million increase. We'll talk about the results of all of these. The bonding bill, which we came up very well, top 4 priorities for that, and obviously there's probably about 300 things in the bonding bill, but public facility authority funds, which is your wastewater and drinking water and stormwater. Greater Minnesota Child Care, we've heard a lot about shortages in these areas. Business development, public infrastructure grants, which Windom has gotten at least 1 or 2 of those. And then other infrastructure projects like roads, bridges, etc. The lead line inventory and replacement bill, we worked very heavily on that. I testified on that in a couple committees. Permanent ongoing funding for city streets, which we finally got for cities under 5,000, which you guys have always told me we want permanent ongoing funding, not a one-time check every 3 years or whatever it was happening. We kind of get the leftovers. So we finally did get that done. We'll talk about the results of that. Corridors of Commerce, both changing the formula and having some good funding for that. That would be Highway 60, I think 71 counts in that, 23, 19. So just kind of those major thoroughfares that are not interstates. Child care grants, and then our housing funds. Next slide talks a little bit about just the illustration of what was going on. There's this huge surplus that was there, and so everybody was fighting over who's going to get this surplus. It's almost sometimes not as beneficial as when they have deficits, because just everybody thinks they're entitled to it. So education, higher ed, transportation, ag, everybody thinks they're entitled to the surplus. And then, the taxpayers obviously are in there somewhere too. Next slide talks about the actual forecast, and the budget surplus itself ended up being very immense at the end of the day. They were $17 billion over in collections. That's just an enormous amount of money. That was on the one-time side, and then the ongoing side was, a little over $5 billion. Next slide talks about the Democrats taking control of everything by 1 vote in the Senate, by 2 votes in the House. So it was a narrow majority, but it's still a majority. And so 34 to 33 in the Senate, 70 to 64 in the House. And the thing is that there are not a lot of rural Democrats left, and so we're working our best with the people. I served with a lot of these folks when they were House members. Now they're over in the Senate. So Ann Rest was chair of the tax committee. She sat across from me for years, and Bobby Joe Champion was in the House, and then he chairs economic development. And so, we just work with the folks that are there. We're not a partisan organization, and you work with whoever is in power. The Senate happens to be a little bit more bipartisan, so Senator Weber, who has your area, had an enormous amount of influence. He was on the he's the only Republican on the tax conference committee, and has an excellent relationship on both sides of the aisle. So he really, stepped up in about probably the most effective senator in the minority that you can find in terms of representing his district. On the next slide is just a little about local government aid. If you move on to the next one, we focused on $150 million increase. They ended up with $80 million. We did update the formula. There were some factors that were really hurting some of our members, not as much Windom, but like War Road, Detroit Lakes, East Grand Forks were sliding backwards on the formula, and we just needed to get that updated. And we wanted to add inflation and population growth automatically, but they held off on that. We did get it in the House bill, but not in the final bill. Next slide. We had a lot of competition with things that was proposed in the tax bill. Now, the LGA is carried in the tax bill. It's an appropriation that doesn't have to pass. It's just stays at if they don't have a tax bill, the world doesn't end. LGA just keeps at the level it was last year, but all the tax changes don't necessarily have to happen. So here's all the different things they were arguing about: housing aid, public safety aid, walls checks, dependent credits, and all these different things. So we were, part of that mix that we were trying to get LGA shoved in there. Next slide. The governor was on the lowest side of all the LGA changes. He was in only $30 million in his initial proposal, and then we pushed around on him quite heavily. Steve, you're at lobby day, weren't you? He came to our lobby day, and we had kind of a dust up with him. Our organization did, and then he came to our luncheon and said, "Hey, I heard you guys." So he bumped it to $40 million, which was still not enough in our opinion, considering the size of the surplus and the needs of the local governments. So we ended up getting it pushed up above the governor's, but he kind of was the baseline of increase. Next slide just has some of the activities. We brought in testifiers from different parts of the state, both the House and the Senate. Next slide talks about the proposed increases. You can see obviously our proposal was quite high compared to everything else, but we did end up with an $80 million increase, which was double of what the governor wanted. I think that's a pretty good win. Windom, they're in your packet, not on the slide presentation. There's a little bar chart that shows Windom specifically that I printed out for you. And the final outcome has Windom at $200 and some thousand increase. So you got a nice healthy increase in LG. Some years we had a freeze, so you always just kind of had to figure out how we're going to pay. Obviously you have pay increases. The unions want more money. Everything costs more. Inflation is obviously very high. So it was a nice, healthy increase. Next slide. And just talk about bonding and some of our priorities. The slide after that, we had no bonding bill last year, it was a bonding year. Bonding bills require a 60% majority. The House had GOP folks that voted the original bill down, or they actually voted the original bill up. The Senate voted the original bill down early in session. The Democrats threatened to pass a partisan bill that just funded Democrat projects, and they started moving that through the committee process and kind of scared everybody. And then the Republicans came back and said, well, we decided we'll work with you after all. And so they did come up with a fairly nice bill at the end of the day. The Republicans passed it out of the House on a bipartisan vote in the first couple months of session, actually. So here you can just see the priorities that we had for bonding and cash and stuff. There are obviously a big difference when you can bond for things versus cash it out. And because they were spending all this money on all these other things, there wasn't a lot of cash left. So when the cash bill got brought up, it was a big problem. So we weighed in with a press release. You can move on to the next one. We ended up, the Republicans' top priority at the end of the day ended up being nursing home funding, of all things, because they felt that the Human Services bill was inadequate. We've had a lot of nursing homes close. They have a hard time finding workers. In my area alone, Ballatin, Redwood Falls, Minneota, just in my old district, we've closed 3 or 4 nursing homes in the last 5 years. So that was a big deal for the Senate Republicans. So they got $300 million in nursing home aid that the Democrats agreed to. The GOP agreed, let's have a bonding bill that blends that blends bonds and cash together, because some things need cash that you can't bond for, like nonprofits, for example, or things that are of high urgency. So, for example, the city of Bovee, if they don't get that Canisteo mine issue figured out, the whole city is going to be flooded and underwater. That's a big deal, big issue for that town. If that was in Windom, it would obviously be crisis mode. They cashed that out so they can quickly move otherwise bonds get sold like in August. They don't have time for that. So there's certain things you have to be more nimble on. So the final outcome on our 4-5 big priorities were on the right side there. Why did the bonding bill come together? Public pressure. I don't know how many times we bugged Steve and Dominic and others to, call your legislators, but the Republicans were kind of holding up the bonding bill, and at the end of the day, Senator Weber voted for it and supported it. But they were holding off on things. Now, he has a lot of nursing homes in his district. If you take Cottonwood, Jackson, Pipestone, there's a lot of old people out here. And so, we always say, hey, we want our thing, our bonding bill. But these legislators have other issues in their districts. They have farmers, they have colleges, they have other things. And so it made sense at the end of the day when all the dust settled, they all worked together and got it figured out, but it was a little messy getting there. So the airplane landed at the end, and maybe the fuselage was on fire and the wings were missing and the landing gear wasn't down, but they did land the plane. The environment, real quick, we had some issues that we worked on. Some we didn't previously work on, like this lead pipe thing. There is no safe amount of lead in drinking water. If you say, well, how much lead would you like your child to drink? Usually the answer is none. And so we have a lot of old lead pipes, particularly in small rural cities. And to be able to replace a lead pipe that runs from whether it's the street for you guys to do it or from the street to the house, you're talking about a little old lady getting charged $10,000. It's just not cost. Sometimes their houses are barely worth that in some of these really small towns. So we're trying to figure out an inventory process, and this is kind of a down payment to get this figured out. And we are utilizing federal matching money. Last minute bonding bill, we had $80 million for PSIG grants. You guys utilize that here in Windom, for example. Water Infrastructure Fund got $87 million. We tapped out the full federal matching money. And then we had some various greater Minnesota projects at $262 million. Then we had some money in the Clean Water Legacy bill that was separate from bonding. And there's a lot of one-time funding, not a lot of ongoing funding. So we did block a lot of bad things. There was a proposal from one of the Metro legislators to change the PFA formula that would have really, really harmed the rural. We benefit from the PFA formula right now, so we fought tooth and nail. We had to go to the governor's office, the Speaker of the House. They brought it up in one committee in economic development. We killed it there. Then they brought it back in the bonding bill. We killed it there. We got the Republican House members to say we will vote for no bonding bill if you change the PFA formula. So they do have a lever to work with in bonding where they need to have a supermajority to pass the bill. So we were working with everybody trying to kind of play whack-a-mole to kill that thing. We were the main lead on that. Next one, just looking ahead real briefly, it's going to be a traditional bonding next year. We assume that they will do that. Will there be constitutional amendments put on the ballot? I don't know. I mean, there's an equal rights amendment. There's some other various things floating around for ideas. The legislature kind of soured on those, so we'll see if they want to throw anything on the ballot for people to vote on or not. A lot of people don't want the Constitution to turn into a phone book like California where, well, let's just put everything on the ballot. They're there for a reason. It's a representative republic. Do your job and vote for stuff up or down. If we don't like it, we'll vote you out. That's kind of how it's supposed to work instead of throwing everything on the ballot. Will there be another surplus? We don't know. We'll find out in November. There could be some items that need some tweaking and fixing from 2023. Lots of policy changes. It starts on February 12th. It's a shorter session right after precinct caucuses. And then the things that are up next year would be the president, the U.S. House, Senator Klobuchar's Senate seat, and the Minnesota House. The Minnesota Senate is not on the ballot. Here's some key dates coming up. We have our summer conference in Thief River and our fall conference in Wilmer. I think that's our... Tried to pound about 50 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag. If we have other handouts in here, those are supplemental. There's things like the public safety aid and what you can spend money on and what you can't. So you can't spend money on tear gas, for example. I'm sure it's a high priority for Windom. So there's certain things in there. We just were like, yeah, if you want to word the bill that way, it's not going to impact most of our cities. But there are some requirements on the public safety aid. LGA is pretty traditional as it was. And I'll just end on this note to thank you for working with me on individual items. Steve maybe told you I was involved in the special appropriations for Windom for the plant issue. I worked with you guys on the water plant here a few years ago and trying to get that PFA loan forgiven. Try to get the plant sold, reopened, and the housing project done and so forth. So we had some Zooms and some meetings with Senator Weber and others. The Ag Commissioner was the lead on that, and always helped. It's always fun to do a little extra effort for Windom. You guys you're my first city visit. You're always my favorites. So you're the first city I'm visiting this summer. So I'll stand for any questions you have. I know you have an agenda to get through.
We said all the right things there at the end, so that's good. My question is, with the $19 billion surplus, give or take, and the taxpayer getting $260, do you think that is going to get the same makeup of the legislature in the next election then? Or is that all going to be forgotten about at that point?
I don't know that people are going to be focused on that. And there's an income thing it hits, and then you don't get any money. If you're 70,000 household income or whatever, there just wasn't a lot of pressure for people to get these checks back. I mean, we're obviously hired to get money for you guys, and the K-12 people are running around. The unions and the superintendents for K-12 money and people for nursing homes and whatever. There isn't anybody running around advocating for these checks. You have to have the average citizen has to show up and demand it at town meetings or call or email. Now, when I was in the legislature years ago, we had that huge surplus under Ventura, and there was kind of an outcry from people. We want some money in our pocket. We just didn't hear much of that this year, even though inflation right now is 3 times higher than what it was under Ventura. But we just didn't hear it. Do you think you would? But we just didn't hear much about it.
Then my other thought was, obviously we needed marijuana, so we got that. But we don't see anything as far as gun reform. And I just wonder, with the Minnesota legislature, do you see conversation about gun reform?
Like gun control or change in ownership type things. They did pass a couple things. They flew under the radar a little bit. The biggest change was there was kind of a red flag law that changed, and that didn't get a lot of attention, but it did pass as part of the public safety bill. The reason it didn't get as much attention is they folded it into the overall public safety bill, and they didn't pass it as a standalone bill for people to vote yes or no on. So, you know, if you vote the public safety bill down, you know, what are you going to do? Shut the prisons down and free Barabbas? So they kind of had to pass the public safety bill. I don't know that the gun control bill would have passed on its own, because there were a couple Iron Range Democrats that really didn't want to vote for it as a standalone, but they were like, well, we kind of have to vote for the public safety bill. So the red flag one, you can petition if you suspect someone has severe, I guess, mental issues or whatever it is, that they shouldn't have a gun or what have you. They can petition for a judge to go take them. Some people are saying that's going to make matters worse, because you have, you know, the police marching out into people's homes and asking for this stuff. So we'll see how it works. I don't know. We don't lobby on that, so I didn't really pay real close attention. There were some bills that were proposed that failed or just couldn't get traction. That in a lot of this rural metro divide, I think, kind of popped up, like you can't borrow your gun to someone, I think was one. Well, my son shoots trap, and we have low-income kids who don't have a shotgun that need to shoot trap. That would have been against the law had that bill passed. Well, then the legislators are like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. So then they dropped the idea. It sounds like a good idea at first, but in practicality, it didn't really work. So I would suspect that the two that passed, and I can't really remember the other one, are probably about as all they're going to do. I don't see them doing any more. Any other questions, concerns? Are we on the right track? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
Next item is first reading in ordinance 196, second series, land use code revision.
Good evening, Andrew Spielman, Building and Zoning Official. So I've included in your packet this evening the final draft of ordinance, which would be our subdivision land use code. Been to the council a few times with this. At the last city council meeting, we had the public hearing. Didn't get a lot of public comments, but did get some from the council. So at the last planning commission meeting, we brought the entire code back to them, and in that there were a few changes from the last time the city council saw it. So included in your packet this evening was the action item, but then there was also a memo included that just kind of highlighted the changes in the code from the last time you saw it. If you remember the last time we had it here, there was a bunch of comments in the side. There was some highlighting and some red text and things like that. All of that has been deleted from the final draft that you see now. What's in that final draft that we included in your packet this evening are some deletions that are highlighted in yellow, and then some additional proposed revisions. Those are laid out in the memo, so just to call attention to them so you weren't kind of searching through the whole document. It is quite a long document. We added back in the wetlands and shoreland, airport zoning. All of the other sections that we had deleted before are back in there now, so it's pretty much in the final format. Just to highlight a few of the changes, and most of these were staff recommendations just when we were going through the code, things that we identified that we wanted to bring to the Planning Commission's attention. In the subdivision code, We added the definition for open space. We talk about open space, parkland dedication in subdivision code. So originally there was an idea where all of our definitions would be in one section. That's kind of the path we started down, and then we backtracked a little bit because there's some definitions that apply and have a different meaning in subdivision than maybe our land use code. And so we added back, since subdivisions are in a completely different chapter of our code, we added the definitions back in the beginning, and we felt it was important to add a definition for open space. That's an example of one that it's a little bit different than what we would see in the zoning code. Some minor little things. In definitions, we added the word drive-through. The current definition said drive-in, and it was referring kind of to the old school drive-in. They come out, take your order, you eat your meal there. But the definition did apply to a drive-through establishment like you'd see at a bank or a fast food restaurant. In our code, we referenced drive-through, so we felt it was important to add that to the definition there. Bed and breakfast facilities, we have a chapter in code specific to them. That section starts by saying that they're allowed as a conditional use in all residential districts. AO district it's not titled the residential district, but it's meant for low density residential. Bed and breakfast facilities are probably appropriate there because we allow single family homes. So we wanted to add that in the AO district just to eliminate any confusion. While we did that, we just listed them in every residential district, R1, R2, R3, as a conditional use, and then reference that section of code. In R1, we deleted manufactured housing as a permitted use. In our code, section 152.365, which is referenced, is specific to what we would consider a mobile home. That section specifically says that the home must bear a HUD certification. A HUD certification you will only find on a mobile home. So the question was, in our low density, larger lot residential district, would we want a mobile home, a manufactured home on one of those lots? Planning Commission decided that probably wouldn't be the most appropriate there, so we deleted that. That doesn't mean all manufactured housing. So a modular home, a prefab home, an industrialized building that's meant to be a single family home, that would just be allowed because it is by definition a single family home, which is still permitted. So it is just kind of a technical thing, but when you said manufactured housing and reference that section, that is specifically what our code was talking about there. On page 59, we added a reference to open space requirements in the R2 district. So this open space thing was the source of a lot of conversation, and that section in our code was only found under the R3 district, and it was very specific to multifamily buildings. The requirement is that you have to have a certain amount of open space, green space, outdoor space per dwelling unit in a multifamily building. But we allow multifamily dwellings as a conditional use in other zoning districts. R2, B1 I think we do, B3 we do. And what we didn't want to see was for a multifamily home in another district not have to meet that requirement because it wasn't listed in that zoning district. So we actually just did a copy and paste, and we added an entirely new subsection under our specific requirements, specific regulations, that says this open space requirement for all multifamily dwellings. So then in every district where we reference multifamily dwellings, whether it be a permitted or conditional use, we reference that section in code now. Again, just want to make sure that applies to any multifamily dwelling building in any zoning district. In the B1 zoning district, we added a little bit to the accessory structures. So this is in B1. That's kind of our transition zone between residential and the downtown business area. single-family homes are allowed there. Businesses are allowed there, so in the existing code, it just said accessory structures, or accessory uses. The question was, a single-family home in the B1 district, should they meet the same requirements for their accessory structure as any other residential district? And the reason that became a question is because the section of code that's for accessory structures specifically says accessory structures in residential districts. Since B1 is in a residential district, I would have never applied that to this section. The Planning Commission felt that, yes, that those should meet the same requirements. So it's not much of a change, but it is going to bring in some size restrictions and some material standards for those accessory buildings as well. Open space. In the B2 district, we added a use, hospitals and clinics for humans, and also another use, animal clinics. They're there now. We've got clinics in the B2 district. The vet clinic is technically not in city limits, but if it was ever annexed in, it would certainly be a B2 district. They seem appropriate. They're not causing any issues, and it just seemed like that was an appropriate use in that district. So we changed the word from light manufacturing to light industrial in the B2 district. That's under conditional uses. Seems like a minor change, but light industrial is what we talk about in every other district. And I kind of laughed when I made the choice because that could be read to mean that you're manufacturing lights, which was not the intention of it. So light industrial, making that change. And then added private, public, and parochial schools as a permitted use in B3. We already allow trade and vocational schools. The Bark building was a school that's in that district. That's a use that's referenced in some other districts, and it seemed appropriate to add it there as well. Corrected some references in some different areas, and then corrected a state statute. That state statute there on page 140, that's the one in our manufactured homes section of our code. That's the one that says that manufactured home parks have to be allowed as a conditional use in any zoning district that allows two-family dwellings. When we were kind of looking up some of that other stuff for the manufactured housing, we wanted to make sure there wasn't a statute that would contradict our code to make sure our code was still in line with statute, and we realized then that statute was just incorrectly cited in our existing code. I think it was just a typo. Like it's 462 instead of 426. So with all of that, basically what you see is exactly what you saw before with these last couple of changes. Again, they really came up when we were doing our final review, making sure that all the cross-references were correct, doing some spelling and grammar corrections. There were a number of definitions that weren't in alphabetical order we had to change around and things like that. So with that, the request tonight is to, after review of all of this, for the council to approve the first reading of this ordinance. This will be the first of 2 readings before it's officially adopted. So with that, if there's any questions about anything since the public hearing or any of these last changes that are before you, I would be happy to try and answer them.
Anytime that you would be doing something that was in conflict with the code, can you always apply for a variance, or is it's just out if it?
Typically, variances don't apply unless it's referenced, and variances are very hard to approve. The statute actually doesn't allow a use variance. So if you want a building use in a district that's not specifically listed, either as permitted or conditional, we would actually have to enact a code amendment then to add that use in a zoning district we feel appropriate. Variances are meant to vary from setbacks, height, maybe lot coverage, things like that. There's some statute that applies to those two that make them difficult to approve. That's why it's kind of important that we do this and try and do it right to begin with. We have pretty broad discretion when we're writing code, but once it's written and it's in code, we're really forced to follow it. I hope that we've done it the right way. A lot of these changes that you see before you tonight are things that, again, they've been there from the beginning and we just finally noticed them now. I don't doubt that there will be more of those as you use the code and as you try and implement it. There will be things that come up that we maybe didn't think of. It's not uncommon to have what we call a housekeeping ordinance change towards the end of the year where we try and clean up some definitions or code references or just some little typos or errors that we just otherwise didn't notice. When we get it back from the codifiers, we'll really see what we have.
Yeah, can we get a motion to approve this ordinance?
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of the motion number 196-2.
I would second.
Motion's been made and second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign.
Thank you. I think originally I was going to be back the first meeting in August for second reading. Since this meeting got pushed back a day and our code says that we have to have 14 days in between readings, that'll get pushed back to actually the second meeting in August. But I will be back for second reading at that time. First meeting in August, sorry. I was going to come the next meeting in July, but I'll have to skip that one. So, first meeting in August. Thank you.
Okay, the next item is IIJA grant. And Steve?
I will go over that. Thank you, Councilmember. IIJA is the federal, one of the federal spending bills that had been passed, Infrastructure Jobs Act. Part of that bill had dollars out for electric system improvements, a lot of clean energy improvements, grid reliance, things like that. And so we kind of were watching these. We're working with our Compass, which is Central Municipal Power and Services Agency folks. We submitted a concept paper. The first round of these grant dollars came out, and you had to ask for at least $5 million. If you didn't have that, they weren't accepting them. So what we did is some of the cities partnered with Compass. So Windom, we partnered with the city of Blue Earth and submitted an application. We submitted that concept paper. The first round of concept papers that were submitted, none of the ones that were submitted by our group, and very few were encouraged by the federal government to continue. We submitted a second round, slightly different program. We tweaked the concept paper a little bit and resubmitted it. We then got encouraged. The city, Windom, city of Blue Earth, got encouraged to submit a full application. There were 78 nationwide that were encouraged out of probably 1,000 that were submitted. There were 78 that were encouraged to apply. Depending on how much the projects are asking for, there's probably 20 to 30 of them will get funded. So there's a 1 in 2 to 1 in 3 chance of getting some dollars. And so what we had put in for Windom, it's listed in the memo here. We had talked about transformer upsizing. Some of our transformers in our system are one, getting dated, and two, with increased electric loads for things, like electric cars, things like that. There's going to be need to replace those. And so we thought this would be a good opportunity to see if we get some federal dollars to help pay for that portion of our project. We also have transformer replacement, sectionalized cabinets. We're doing some automated metering. We do have the fiber system in town. We can do some advanced metering so people can control their usage. They can look at time of day usage, things like that. set their thermostats through Wi-Fi and things like that. So we're looking at doing that kind of as part of a load control type of a project. We also are looking at doing the load control itself, so maybe providing those like Nest thermostats or something along those lines to all of our customers so that they can have those at lower no cost to help the electric grid. So if they're out of the house for a time of day and want to turn the electric, the temperature for the air conditioner up a degree or two so it doesn't run quite as hard, save a little money, they can certainly do that. So we've put this concept paper together. Our portion of the project is roughly $5 million. It's just a little under $5 million. It's an 80% federal grant, 20% local match. One of the things that we had included with our application for the grid resiliency was to underground our electric overhead lines, which we've been doing for many years, thanks to Mr. Grunig and his crew way back in the day, starting that project, which was something we budget for on an annual basis and do anyway. So we knew that we had at least a good chunk of that local match already planned out into our capital budget for future years. So looking at that, we had a pretty good portion of those dollars committed. And as Mr. Seifert was here talking earlier, the state put a bunch of money into various programs at their level. One of the programs they put forth was a federal competitiveness fund, which essentially the state is going to help cities that are accessing these federal dollars to leverage those dollars. So we may be able to apply for some of those state funds to help us out with our local share of match. There was $115 million committed to that in the state of Minnesota through the legislature. It's brand new. They haven't set the program up yet, but I've had some conversation with the assistant director of the Department of Commerce and let him know about our project, provided him some contact information and some context of our projects. So we're going to be working on that. What we're doing at this time, we talked to the Utility Commission, got a recommendation to move ahead with a full application. So tonight there's really kind of two actions that we're requesting of the council. One is to approve a resolution supporting the application for these federal grant dollars for the IIAJ funds. The second piece then, if that is approved, support for applying for the project. The second piece of it is a grant agreement, it's an agreement for services to write the grant with Frontier Energy. These federal grants run about 50 pages and are very technical. And so we've contacted a grant writer to help provide those services, and we have a $15,000 not to exceed number on that. The Utility Commission has also recommended that for approval. So just with those two items, I guess if you have any questions, I can answer them for you as best I can.
Steve, what was the time frame again on that?
The federal window for this, they are allowing up to 7 years to spend the funds. So it's not an immediate thing. They realize there's a fairly long application process, and then you have supply chain, issues. So they're not really pushing to get it done immediately. But we think we would have the amount of time in the budget to just kind of meet that match. If we don't get any of the state funds, we would have that through our kind of normal course of business.
Can we get a resolution or a motion for a resolution of support on this?
And Councilmember, so when we do the motion for this on the resolution, if that motion could, or the motion for the resolution could also approve authorizing myself and the mayor to sign any documents. If we could add that to the motion, I appreciate it.
Well, I would introduce the resolution and then authorize the city administrator and the mayor to sign.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Roll call.
Oh, roll call. Okay, never mind.
Nelson.
Yes.
Quaid.
Yes.
Benson.
Yes.
Grunig.
Yes.
S1.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the other part of this is an agreement for grant application and writing services by Frontier Energy. That's a motion also?
Just a motion.
I'll make a motion to agree on the applicant for the grant application for writing service of Frontier Energy.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Okay. Thank you. I will keep you updated as we get this thing going. The application is due first part of August, so we're working diligently on this.
Our next item is the Windom Chamber has 3 street closure requests. One is July 20th for hot dog night, August 1st for a night tea night, and August 22nd, the 4th Tuesday. Can we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to grant the City of Windom Chamber of Commerce the street closure request.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, our next item is personnel recommendation at the community center, hiring a maintenance position.
Tim Snyder, Community Center Director. I'm here tonight to recommend the hiring of Robbie Anderson for the union full-time custodian position. It's a grade 1 position. Recommended to hire Robbie at a step 10 of the union wage scale, 6-month probationary period. Upon successful completion, a step increase would be received.
I'd make a motion to approve the community center hiring recommendation.
Whole second.
Motion's been made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Okay, the next item is the mayor's appointment to the Telecom Commission.
Yeah,
I
we're
believe that's Tim Hiley.
Yep, correct. Yep, Tim Hiley was the mayor's recommendation for the appointment. That would be for what was left of one of the terms. We do have two openings on that board, so if this is approved this evening, we will still have one opening. If anybody knows anyone interested, please let us know.
I'll make a motion for the hiring the mayor's appointment for Telecom Commission.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, any new business? Nothing?
Nope.
Okay. Any old business? Any old business? Okay. Council comments. Scott, you have anything?
Not tonight, thank you.
Jenny, you have anything?
Just that I was at the ribbon cutting with Councilmember Grunig for the Veterans Memorial, and that is just beautiful. If anybody hasn't stopped down to actually walk around and see the detail on the monuments, it's really neat. And then to drive by too when it's lit up at night is a whole nother experience. So thank you, Marv, for helping to put this together and bringing it to town, because I think it's a really nice asset to Windom.
Marv, you have anything?
Nothing to add to that.
You have anything?
Not a thing.
Okay. I guess we're gonna close the meeting.